Well, good evening,
Evening.
everyone.
Good evening, yes.
Well, I'm going to open with the prayer that our author ends with. So let us pray. Bring us out of the house of bondage today, O God, into the house of freedom. Here are our thanks for the works of hands and heart and mind. Release us from the guilt we carry at not doing enough, never being done. Bring us into the grace of completion in incompleteness. Sabbath us from time to time, even on the job. In the name of the true God. Amen. So tonight we begin with chapter 7 on page 62, relinquishing as Sabbath. Any thoughts from anyone on that? Hi, Pam.
Well, Pam and Andy and Jackie will remember the word relinquish from last night. We were talking about kenosis, and that was funny. I turned the page to read these chapters, and that relinquish word reminded me of that conversation we had last night about kenosis and when Jesus relinquished his divinity, temporary relinquishment. That's what made me think of it almost immediately.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It was on top of mind for us.
Mm-hmm.
It just tied in perfectly. I was surprised when I picked this up this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about surrender and humility, like we talked about last night.
Mm-hmm.
Except in the Philippians verse, Jesus relinquishes it until he's resurrected, basically. I mean, he kind of gets it back. Here, I think she's really saying to let it go for good. And,
Yeah.
although I suppose we can temporarily relinquish things.
Well, I guess that's what I was, back in the Sabbath pattern that she was talking about in the previous chapter called Prayer Sabbath.
Right.
She was talking about going into exile and then returning from exile. And so I thought of the relinquishment as being temporary for us too.
Sure. You are. It certainly can be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it comes to throwing away T-shirts, and then sometimes that can be permanent.
Mm-hmm.
You got to hang on to your KU championship.
I had a lot of friends in college who had a lot of their college T-shirts made into quilts. You ever seen where people do that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned throwing things away, and that ties back to you guys must have done decluttering last week in this book.
Oh, we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. I thought you were looking at me like you were going to say when you moved here. I'm like, yeah, we did. There was a huge bin in our driveway, and Beth threw everything she could into it, whether we needed it or not.
Except the cat.
Except all the cats. The kids were in it a couple times. They were mashing it down to try to get more into it. But in a way, that's a good vision, isn't it? Because we tend to do that when we change in some way, when we have a change in our life, whether we're moving or we're transitioning to a new job. We tend to declutter and relinquish and all of that and let go of things that for whatever reason we didn't think to do that before.
It would be better to do it gradually, wouldn't it?
Sure it would. Not that that can happen, but yeah, it would be better.
The problem with doing it gradually is when you do it gradually, at least in our case, something else replaces what you gradually take away.
Just because there's an empty spot on the counter doesn't mean something has to go there.
Well, and talking about, and I know you're thinking practically about things, but I suppose that happens intellect or mentally too,
Yes.
Spiritually. We give up a thing and we have a tendency to just fill that gap back in.
Right.
So,
Maybe we could think of it as relinquishing is another term for it would be like downsizing in place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Mm-hmm.
And taking away the power of the thing that you give away, because that thing you give away has some level, some measure of power over you, traps, holds you,
Right.
constrains you.
The going from page 63 into 64.
Mm-hmm.
Any sense of intensity attached to our keeping of the Sabbath will get in the way of keeping Sabbath. We declutter our houses and our lives to remove confusion from our path. Relinquishing is something else, the absence of activity. We sit amid the clutter, the household hum of a dryer, the noise of a child's radio, the television set, and the telephone, and we are at peace, still practicing in the presence of God. That it made me think that it's so true. We can be in a space in our own heads
Mm-hmm.
where the noise, we don't hear the noise, right? We can tune those things out.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, living in Chicago, you could, my sister did this once, but you could be in an apartment that's right next to the L tracks, right?
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this before, and it's quite a loud noise when the L goes by. I mean, you can't hear. If you're on the phone, you would just say L, and everyone would stop talking. And then when it went by, you'd start talking again. But there comes a point where you don't even notice it anymore. You know, isn't that true? And this goes on to talk about the person who moved to New York City but couldn't stand the noise of the city. I remember when we went to seminary, we were living downtown Chicago, and we moved to Swanee for seminary, and Swanee is very quiet. And Beth continued in her job in Chicago, and they had a corporate apartment that she used right off of Michigan Avenue. And she said she had a lot of trouble sleeping for several months because she's so used to the noise in the city, you know, that it didn't bother you. But then you go to Swanee for a week, and you're able to sort of decompress, and you're used to the silence. So then when you go back to the city, you notice the noise again that you didn't notice before. And then you're used to the noise, and then you can't sleep because it's silent. And it's a weird thing to think about, but I understand that. And I think we do that to ourselves a lot with Sabbath. I remember as a first year in seminary, we had to do centering prayer as part of a spirituality class.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard, Pam, you'll get this. It's so hard when you first start doing it. It's so hard to really empty your mind, to clear your mind out completely, because there's always going to be something. But you do get used to it the more you do it. Just like anything, you've got to practice it. And you can get to the point where you can tune everything out and sort of get to that space where you're open and empty to hear, right? To receive. So we were doing it one day in class, and there was construction going on campus. And right in the middle of it, it's quiet and everyone's doing it. And all of a sudden this crane dropped whatever load it had, and the windows were open. And I swear everyone jumped about, a foot off of their seat. And then we had to end. You couldn't come back from that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking in these last chapters about something about noticing things, and maybe it's in the last chapter called slowing. But slowing down allows you to notice things. Again, I can't remember where I saw that about noticing. Acknowledging. If you don't slow down, then you miss things. You miss the sound of the L for what it is. You miss the silence for what it is. You miss. I couldn't help and I wanted to say something about it that on a previous chapter, they talked about pausing.
Mhm.
Pause. I think that was in the prayer one. Have you seen the Gatorade commercial where it's you're nodding your head, Pam? It's who's the Olympic athlete? Not Gabby, the gymnast.
Oh,
I
Simone.
can-
Simone Biles. Yeah, so Simone Biles is doing a Gatorade commercial, and the tagline is "Pause is power." So she took a step back, right? And so pausing is power. So she was able to step away from that thing that she couldn't confront at that moment, and she's being celebrated for it, for pausing,
Mhm.
saying no.
In chapter 10, it mentions the best way to keep the Sabbath is to slow down. So it's like the pause, backing up,
Mhm.
separate what you're doing. And it's mentions that civil, it's a spiritual form of civil disobedience.
When
And
she,
I thought I read in several places in this book that that's what Sabbath gives us, a pause. To let God take part in our time. Not just us have time, but God can share in our time. I got this somewhere in the book, in this book that we're reading, that's what Sabbath does for us. Give us the pauses, Jeff, that you were talking about. Anybody remember reading that specific thing? But somewhere in the book, that's where I got that.
I do. I don't remember where, but that's really powerful to be able to have Sabbath all during the week at little times that we need it.
Mm-hmm.
she gives that example, the very last thing she says in the book about, or almost the last thing, where she got in a hurry and destroyed the spider web in the garden, right?
Mm-hmm. She's Russian. Mm-hmm.
I can remember watching the Final Four and yelling at the TV screen to Kansas Jayhawks to slow down.
Oh yeah.
And any team will do it when you steal the ball or you get it away and they run as fast as they can to get it down the thing, and inevitably they trip or they lose control of the ball. And it's like that's where you just have to slow down, reset, and then you do what you know how to do, right?
Mhm.
And we do the same thing. We'll sometimes run with something, and it's like that feeling of running down a hill when you get to the point that the pull or your inertia overtakes you, and you realize I can't stop. I'm not in control anymore, and you you tumble or you don't, but something else could happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, as long as I'm unmuted. Read the very last sentence. Look at the very last sentence.
Oh yeah.
And alter time, yeah.
But and alter time,
Mm-hmm.
AR time.
Which takes us back to her opening chapter, where she
Didn't
talks
she
about,
mention?
yeah,
Didn't she use that play on words at the beginning?
she talked about altar time in I believe the first chapter.
She does. Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I don't know if I shared this that first day or not, I took a class in my doctoral program. It was in my second year. I took a class called Beauty as Nature. And it was broken into 3 different areas. And the first part was spent outside. there were two different locations we used. And we were given an amount of time to just walk around outside. And they suggested a mantra of some sort, like in centering prayer, that you would say over and over in your head as you walked around and just took in the beauty of what you saw, right?
Mhm.
And then the next part, we looked at economy and nature, and then we looked at that part's you're not interested in, to my point. But in the being outside part, I remember at one of our locations, and we had to journal. We had to write a journal about our experiences daily. And part of it was taking that time to slow down and look. And I noticed walking around in an area that I've walked around, hundreds of times between undergraduate and seminary, and now that program. And I walked up on a hill going into a field, and it just looked like an altar, literally an altar, standing there, as if God was inviting everyone to the table right there in the middle of nature. And I was very struck by that. And so when I read this about altar time, that's all I could think of. I think she even mentioned a book in here. Now I can't remember. It was a book that we had read in that class about. It's called like Little Altars Everywhere or something to that effect. But it just played right into that. And so I understand, at least in what I think she's saying about that altar time, that it's there if we take the time to notice it and acknowledge it and live into it.
It's there.
Yeah.
Thomas Merton, she quoted Thomas Merton in a previous chapter, calling prayer a deepening of the present.
Right.
If you don't slow down, I've always been taught that three things suffer when you get in a hurry: your accuracy, your creativity, and your communication. And while that's a very businessy application, if you had been in a big hurry to get to a place, you wouldn't have noticed that altar. And so Thomas Merton, in the deepening of the present, you're slowing down, not just to slow down, but it has the effect of stretching out time. People always say, oh, your kids will be grown up in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And I've never, I suppose at times I felt like a week might get away from me, but I always tried very hard to try to stretch those things out. Maybe I'll forget all those times later on when I'm more forgetful, and it'll seem like it went by in a blink of an eye.
But it does go fast. Time, and as we get older, time gets faster somehow.
Yes.
Is that what you observe? Not that you're old.
I'm not old. I've been told.
There's an old saying about stop and smell the roses. And that all of the discussion that we're having, or most of it at least, makes me think of that. Sabbath says stop, and Sabbath is about stopping, and smelling the roses to me is powerful. It can mean a lot of things. It can mean appreciate the hands of God. It could mean connect back with God. It could just mean stop what you're doing and do something else. But the discussion that we're having right now brings that to my mind. Stop and smell the roses.
Jackie, there was in this book, she mentions a couple times where nodding, a nod is a prayer. Did you pick up on that? And so I think of that as almost like pumping the brakes on your day.
Yeah.
You acknowledge a thing, even though it might just be a little thought or a prayer to yourself about the beauty of a thing or the difficulty of a thing, or you're just noticing something. It's almost like pumping the brakes, slowing down, letting the moment not get away from you.
Well, and often if being in the present, I often feel like it's extended into the eternal. Just because I not just because, but I just do. It's, yeah, time contracts and expands at the same time. But I mean, like Bile, you were talking about Bile. She recognized what she had to do.
Right.
Yeah.
She named it, and she did what she needed to do
Mhm.
in her time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have to say, I do, we talk about nods, and when she talks about the little, she doesn't call them rituals, she calls them patterns maybe that she has of saying goodbye to the house in the morning or hello to the house when she returns, things like that. Every time we've done this, as long as I can remember with the kids, when we go on a trip somewhere and we pull out of the driveway, we'd say, bye house, see you in a week or see you in 2 weeks, whatever. And then we go to wherever we're going. Now, we've never said that, acknowledge the house. We never said hello house, but we have walked into houses, places where we've gone before and we stay in the same place, and you kind of go, so that's kind of a nod. But we'll always say, goodbye Swanee house or goodbye Lake house or whatever. And that's just that. It's a way of acknowledging time, acknowledging that presence, and being thankful for what we've just experienced.
She was kind of a hotel.
Yeah. I can't say I did it with hotel room.
But I like the concept. Goodbye, little house.
I like that sense of getting in somewhere and unpacking and settling in to feel like you're there. I mean, when you're just somewhere for a night, you don't really necessarily do that. But if you're there for any length of time, yeah, it feels nice to be able to do that. Then you feel like you can kind of take a breath. Things feel ordered in some way.
Mhm.
Some people don't live that way. It's the order is in the disorder, right?
I was just thinking Jim.
Is that just a rationalization?
I don't know.
Jim unpacks and puts his things in the drawers. It's in the hotel. Not me. We're just the opposite. I want my things where I know they are in the suitcase.
That's your drawer.
It's like,
Yeah.
It's all right. I'm used to it.
I liked the ending of, what was the chapter here? Just the little thing. This is the end of chapter 8, maybe. No, that was a song. Oh, end of 7, page 70. I am not eager, bold, or strong. All that is past. I am ready not to do at last.
Mhm. That's good.
That was part of relinquishing. Yeah.
There's a university in
Canisius.
back east.
Yeah.
Must be a relative.
Big donor.
And there's a St. Peter's University.
Right.
That's Kentucky. The 8th chapter is interesting. In on sports and physical. She talks about sports and physical. First one, yeah. The problem of Sunday sports versus church, which is human.
She doesn't think.
she thought it was okay.
Yeah, I had a little trouble with that. The way you can find a Baptist Sunday when you're a Catholic mass. Go to mass on Saturday or Baptist, or a temple on Friday night. Still play soccer on. That was the Lord's Day. Sorry.
She makes a lot of room, I think, in this book for non-traditional spirituality.
Her husband's Jewish.
Well, that which would be highly traditional. I'm thinking about just meditation or enjoying nature. She makes a lot of room
Right,
for that.
right. Right. You know, the Sunday thing though, like soccer on Sunday morning, we can complain all we want about the institution and the fact that they do that. But, you know, if you want your children to play, you have to allow that. I mean, if you're not going to allow that, they can't play. So there has to be some give there. And there has to be a way. I understand her notion of finding a way to make it work. And I suppose you could make a deal with your child to say, this is fine, you can do that. But that means you've got to come to church, you know, 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon or whatever. Now, maybe people will do that. I don't know. But it's not the kid's fault that that's when the games are played.
Well, your parents had the rule about Saturday night friends.
They were about Saturday Night Friends. They also had the rule that wouldn't let me play hockey because it played on Sundays.
Yeah.
So
There
I
you
knew
go.
I wasn't allowed to do it.
They
But
knew you had weekends.
And you
Right.
see, you have, I don't agree with the one in religion, but you have to agree that they do honor the Sabbath. The one time when Brigham Young was at an NCAA tournament, the games would be on the Sabbath, because we're not playing. So it was out, that must be a Mormon thing, the Sabbath thing must be a Mormon. No, it's not, it's one of the Ten Commandments. But they actually practice what
they actually do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadie Koufax didn't pitch a World Series game because it was during October, Yom Kippur. Is that right? Rosh-
Yeah, we're Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur about a week or 10 days apart.
So
Yeah.
he couldn't pitch on the Sabbath in the World Series.
Yep.
And he's not the only one.
No, and it's, you know, it's respectable for the people who want to keep that. What you hope is that the institutions they're doing that with honor their wishes.
Yes.
Dearborn, Michigan, one of their high schools was like state football playoff, but it's in Ramadan. If you know where Dearborn is,
Yeah, right.
it's almost all Muslim. And so they said, what are you going to do? We have to fast the daytime, but we still want to do state championship. So they did make some alter or change like this. If you say this is what we believe, but yet we do something different. I have friends who are Roman Catholics. We go out for dinner Friday night, and go, I'll find a restaurant that has fish. Oh, we don't do that. It's like a la carte. If you are going to believe it, you need to practice it.
Right. The you know, she talks about the physical aspect and how certain things become Sabbath, like working out or yoga or Tai Chi or any of those things. And I know there are some groups who call themselves Christians who won't allow yoga because it's a Buddhist practice.
Oh, really?
You know, and it's like, and Buddhists, practicing Buddhists will tell you Buddhism is not
A religion.
technically a religion. Yeah, it's a way of thinking.
It's a practice. It's a
Practice.
Yeah, so it's a spiritual practice. So you can still be Christian and practice some of these Buddhist things because it's not contradicting your belief in God or in Jesus Christ.
But one,
Matter of fact, I think it seems to me that it's very compatible
Right,
with Christianity and vice versa.
right. No, I absolutely agree.
one of the Lutheran synods doesn't allow their members to be in Boy Scouts. The Missouri Synod.
Probably.
Missouri.
It's when he was
Wisconsin,
not,
Wisconsin.
probably Wisconsin.
That's even more conservative because they believe that we as a church teach about God, not the Scouts teach about God. So only us.
Yeah, that sounds like Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Well, there's people who can take things a little too far because, you know, that never happens in religion or politics, does it?
Yeah.
What else grabbed you in these last chapters, or at this point, just any part of the book?
You maybe covered this already. I was in calming kids with music and landscape systems. About seemed like a message I took from some of this is okay, just live in the moment. Don't get so caught up in you got plan ahead, or you know. Which I was going to tell you is what I was doing on Sunday night when I didn't get up to do the prayers right away. I think I was just
Right.
But there is something to that. Okay, just as I just did with the kids, we were quiet. They were actually quiet for a few moments. And it's amazing what you hear around you, especially when you're outside. And you're just quiet and you look around and see what's there, which we don't have much time to do anymore. But live in the moment and enjoy the moment. Just that's Sabbath keeping. So caught up. What's that? And I have a hard time with that.
Yes.
Mhm.
Early on in the book, I like, for example, about the gentleman that was not allowed to play the saxophone in church because evidently the saxophone is not. And to me, that it is that everyone has their own way of celebrating the Sabbath, and God is all inclusive. So if that's something that helps you celebrate the Sabbath, that's fine. The saxophone, that's okay.
Linda's used this title sax for feelings.
But not just the saxophone, but everyone has to find your way to celebrate the Sabbath and to keep it. In other words, so it's not just a Sunday's not a Sunday. It is a Sabbath.
There is a perspective makes a difference, doesn't it? That you can change your perspective on the same thing and see it in a completely different way. I used to do in Alabama the way that we were set up, the church was set up, we were on a corner lot and we had green space that went good 150 yards up one side of the street. Every Good Friday, I would do my 9 o'clock service like I'm going to do here, shameless plug, like I'm going to do here. Then before the midday service, I did Stations of the Cross outside.
Mm-hmm.
And we set them up. The first 7 were set up in the park, in our green space in that park. So you kind of weave all around the park. And then the last 7 were on the walk, along the sidewalk, along the street, coming to the church. So your last station, 14, was right before you went into the church. And then you walked in to the service, to start the service. And the reason I bring this up is because I had someone complain to me the first year I did it because we were outside. And that was it was a main street that went by the church. And they didn't like the noise of the cars going by and the traffic and all that. And, it was hard to hear, even though they had the thing in their hand that had all the service in it, but they were having trouble hearing. And I said, well, I said, I understand that. And I'm sorry if that bothers you, but also think of it, well, I didn't say it that way. What I said was, what I like about that noise is when you think of when Jesus actually did this, when Jesus was forced to walk with the cross, it was in the middle of a day and they didn't stop what was going on around him. There was life happening. There were, people in the marketplace. There were this going on, that going on. So I kind of think of it that way, that we can't be bothered by what's happening around us. We have to focus on the moment, focus on what we're doing right there. And they looked at me and they said, I never thought of it that way. And it never bothered them again.
Perspective.
It's just perspective, right? Now, there's gonna be people who are always gonna be bothered by that, or there's people who aren't gonna be and then sometimes people's perspective can be changed, but they're not wrong. You just might want to look at it in a different way. Which doesn't mean the different way is right. It's just a different way of looking at it, right?
I observed that this book stayed in the lane. Sometimes you get a book and they'll just fill it with a lot of their own personal philosophies. I thought that she stayed bound to scripture and to liturgical and to a faith. I felt like for instance, in the one chapter, I can't remember what chapter it was, but she wrote about clefting. The power of clefting, was it where
Rock of Ages.
yeah, she mentioned Rock of Ages, cleft in me, right? So the idea of clefting is, and it's in the word clefting or crag is in the Psalms. That is a concept that is really a part of who we are as prayer book people, as a Christian faith. And so I thought that it was things like that. It was I just thought she presented her ideas within the context of the Christian faith most of the time. She varied, which was just fine, and told about other faiths and other ways to practice. But I just really appreciated how it was very authentic and true, and tied into scripture and our practice.
And she kept it simple.
Yeah, simple and to the point. Yeah.
There are a couple of things in here on page 76 that I'm still thinking about from the book. What she's talking about the sports part, she says we must face the fact that the churches may not be speaking the holy in a language people can understand. I'm still thinking about this. Language that people can understand. Sports can bring the kind of self-forgetfulness that religion used to bring. And then in the next paragraph, she goes on to say that Sabbath is what some people get from soccer and what others get from Sunday services. I'm still wrapping my head around that, those things.
I used to have people tell me they don't find God in the church on Sunday morning. They find God on the golf course on Sunday morning.
That's kind of what she's saying here about soccer. And I'm thinking, really?
It kind of makes sense. I mean, when I play golf, it's just such a miracle if that ball goes straight in the eye. It seems like a God deal.
I wonder if in all that part of it is community, because you're part of a team, and your team, I mean, there are other teams and there are people that you're used to seeing at soccer, because they're going to be there for that same tournament. And so there's I think that's
where the community is.
Good point.
it.
So I just was using a music stand in the other room, and I was going to sit down and use my little hand drum, and I pushed the music stand all the way down so I could see the music. It's done this other weeks. It creeps up on its own. And I'm like, it's the Holy Spirit. I mean, it was really was that God?
You could find a way to make it that, I'm sure, but no, I think it was a music stand that doesn't work right.
Yeah, kids love it.
So in here, in this chapter on sports and whatnot, or maybe it was the next one, she used a collect from the prayer book. Yeah, no, it was the border.
Oh, the border one.
Well,
which I didn't get a lot of.
Which is the last one.
Border making. What's the next to last one?
Yeah, I didn't.
Chapter 9, Sabbath border making. I like some of what she said in there, but she ends with the collect for, how does the prayer book call it? It calls it, call it for the right use of leisure or something like that. I was looking for it earlier.
It is a collect it is not a Sunday collect, it is a collect of special purpose or.
It's in the back of the prayer book under prayers and thanksgivings. It's
In the book, it's on 84.
right.
He's referring to the Book of Common Prayer.
Like it's number 58 or it's in the same section as
it's
times are in your hands.
so it's number 32 under prayers and thanksgivings, and the title is for the good use of leisure. And it says what she writes there in the book. Oh God, in the course of this busy life, give us times of refreshment and peace, and grant that we may so use our leisure to rebuild our bodies and renew our minds, that our spirits may be open to the goodness of your creation through Jesus Christ our Lord. I thought, I love that collect, and I will use it from time to time when it's fitting for the occasion, right? Because we have to be able to play at some point and be physical and within God. There, as she talks in the book, times to pray and times to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Times to work and time to play. But I also thought of in Sabbath time, I was kind of surprised she didn't go to another collect in the prayers and thanksgivings, and that's on page 833 of the prayer book, and it's just titled "In the Evening." And you think of it in terms of maybe getting back from a day of work or whatever you're doing, and you're winding down, and the prayer says, "O Lord, support us all the day long until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes and the busy world is hushed and the fever of life is over and our work is done. Then in your mercy, grant us a safe lodging and a holy rest and peace at the last."
Tomlin-esque.
Yeah, and some people, I know some families that request that prayer to be read at funerals. Because it does have an eternal rest kind of quality to it, but it also has it's the end of the day. Thank you for the day. And now I pray for rest. So there is Sabbath within it, right?
Absolutely. It's a prayer that was where I went to high school for our evensong on Sunday evenings. We had that. We sang it
Right.
Sunday evening, and it just makes me get tears in my voice when I say it.
I have a funeral coming up, and don't quote me on this, but I think it might be the service for Nancy Kavanaugh. Helen has requested that particular prayer for that. But I had a family in Florence that anyone who died in that family, whatever branch of that family were in, that prayer had to be read.
Have a nice tradition.
Yeah. I did underline one of the things in that border chapter. On page 82, Jeff's looking like, what, really? Throwing that chapter out. It's like James, Martin Luther and James.
Say that.
James is strong. Now, I don't say that, but on page 80, bottom of page 82, Sabbath keepers know where they start and the other stops, where they stop and the other starts. They know boundaries, but they also know the limitlessness of God.
Yes.
And that just made me think of, we talk in any sort of counseling nature or anything like that of having boundaries, and you've done this in countless team building exercises or icebreaker exercises. Where are your personal boundaries, and how you push those, how close. He's a close talker. How close do you get to all that? But it makes me think of when you know somebody really well, that limit. Where your stops and theirs starts. And it's a knowing somebody, it's having that relationship with somebody. And certainly there is that with God, but we have it with those we love too. That and with people you first meet, part of getting to know them is to figuring out where that is, right? And it's okay if it's here and it's okay if it's here. But once there's that understanding, then you can build that trust, and then you can build those other things that go along with it. And I just thought that was neat to see it written out that way, because we do it, whether we know we do it or not.
Well, the schema before that is interesting too. The premise of boundaries is dangerous. It can make us stingy.
Mm-hmm.
Even before that, the more we give, the more we are able.
Yes.
Right.
The multiplier effect.
Yeah. So,
And that reminds me of, did you already talk about power? Where when she was talking about power, the more power you give away.
Right. No,
that
we didn't.
shows your own-
We didn't talk about specifically to this.
Okay.
We said there's power in relinquishing,
Yeah.
but this was specific in a different way.
Right,
Yeah.
think right.
I mean, Jesus in the Gospels will put no limit on our ability to give and to love and to have humility.
Right.
I mean, so the idea of boundaries to Jesus and to our faith is really, I think you'd be hard pressed to find too many examples where Jesus said, "Oh, that's enough." You know, he actually tried to stop his mother from having him start his clock, but she tore that boundary up. So I think I was just thinking about. I just think that boundaries are just such a human construct that we use to protect ourselves. And with God and with Jesus, there's really no point in that, because there's no closeness that's too close. There's no love that's too deep. No commitment. You know, we've never commit ourselves so fully to almost anybody in our lives to the extent that Jesus would want.
There was a cartoon, I don't know if it was in the New Yorker or not. It seems like one that would have been, but maybe it wasn't. And it was up on a bulletin board at the seminary, I remember. And it has people like gathered together in groups, and someone's got a pencil and they're drawing boundaries around their groups. You know, they're putting themselves in boxes. And Jesus was going around with the pencil turned the other way with the eraser and erasing the lines, right?
Yeah.
There
Can
is
we
no
also
east,
say,
there is no west.
what was that, Phyllis?
I said, there is no east, there is no west.
Right. But we also talk about Jesus meeting us where we are. Jesus will always meet us where we are, right? And that's kind of that boundary. Jesus knows where our boundaries are, and Jesus will have to go over here for one person and maybe over here for another person, but Jesus knows where that is. We have to allow Jesus to know where that is, right? We have to open it to accept that.
There's a Jewish midrash story I think I told this to Jackie. A king, his son is estranged from him and he's in another land. And word gets back to the king that the son wants to return. And but he's afraid to return because he doesn't think his father will accept him. And the king says, send word to my son, come as far as you can, and I'll come, and I'll come the rest of the way.
Mhm.
And we just have, it came up because we were talking about the prodigal son a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, and it says while he was still far off,
Yeah.
the dad ran to greet him, right? Yeah.
It was a really good book.
It was.
I'm
Yeah.
not a big fan of book study.
I can do it easier with a book this size.
Jackie's raising her hand too.
Well, I'm a bigger fan if it's short and easy to read.
Well, I enjoyed it. I was expecting it to be like the Sabbath book by Rabbi Herschel. So this was nice and light and contemporary. Good choice.
Yeah, it was a good choice.
It was
For
a
you to
good choice.
remember it all those years, it was good.
Yeah, well, it made an impact on me because I think of its simplicity, and I got to do the music thing, so it's always,
Yeah, that's great. Good.
which I can bring live to your houses anytime if you didn't really hear it well. So
Can't
I'm-
you
I'm
just send us a
happy to-
link?
I don't know how I can send a link. I can just send you the playlist, but it loses something.
Yeah, I like this.
But the playlist would be wonderful.
Oh, I'll take a picture and send it to you, fellas. I got it right here.
Yeah, I need to email it.
Okay,
Well,
Thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
Bye.
and almost happy Holy
Bye.
Week.
Yeah.
See you Palm Sunday.
Hi, guys.